Long ago, in a place called Longxi in China, there lived a man named Li Zheng. Li Zheng was very intelligent and possessed outstanding talents. During the late years of the Tebano era, despite his youth, he passed the highly difficult national examination, the imperial examination. His name was written on a large sheet of paper listing the names of those who had passed. He was then selected to serve as an official in the Jianghan region. His duties involved managing military affairs and prisons. However, Li Zheng was very proud, stubborn, and unable to get along well with others. Therefore, he was dissatisfied with his position as a low-ranking official. After some time, Li Zheng resigned from his post and returned to his hometown to live in seclusion. He spent his days writing Han poetry, a form of difficult poetry, without interacting with others. Li Zheng believed that rather than becoming a boring official and being exploited by his superiors, he would rather write wonderful poems and have his name remembered for 100 years after his death. However, becoming a famous poet was not easy. His life grew increasingly difficult. Li Zheng became increasingly desperate and anxious. His face grew stern, his cheeks became gaunt, and his bones began to protrude. Only his eyes shone brightly. When he passed the exam in his youth, he had a plump, handsome face, but now there was no trace of that left. After several years, Li Zheng could no longer endure the poverty. He had a wife and children at home. Finally, he gave up and returned to the eastern capital. There, he secured a position as a minor official in a local government. This was because he had half given up on living as a poet. His friends who had passed the exam with him were now in high positions. Even those he had once thought of as good-for-nothings had become important people. He had to obey their orders. This was very painful for Li Zheng, who had a high sense of pride. His mood grew dark, and he could no longer find joy in anything. His stubborn nature grew stronger and stronger. A year later, Li Zheng set out on a business trip. One night, he stayed near the Jiusu River. That night, Li Zheng finally lost his mind. He suddenly woke up in the middle of the night, his face pale, and jumped out of bed. He then shouted loudly and ran out of the house. He kept running into the darkness. Li Zheng never returned. His family searched the nearby mountains and fields, but found no trace of him. No one knew what had happened to Li Zheng. The following year, Yuan, a man living in Chen County, was on his way to the southern kingdom by order of the king. Yuan had been a friend of Li Zheng who had passed the same examination as him. The two had been very close. One day, Yuan stayed overnight in a place called Shangyuo. The next morning, as he was about to depart while it was still dark, a villager said, "There is a man eating tiger ahead. It's dangerous to go out so early in the morning, so you should wait until it gets lighter." However, Yuan had many retainers with him, so he didn't worry and set off. As he made his way through the forest path by the light of the moon, a tiger suddenly leaped out of the grass. The tiger seemed ready to pounce, but suddenly turned around and disappeared back into the grass. At that moment, a human voice came from the grass. "That was a close call, that was a close call." Yuan was startled. But he recognized the voice. That voice, could it be Li Zheng? There was no reply for a moment. Only the sound of someone crying could be heard. Eventually, a low voice answered, "As you might have guessed, I am Li Zheng from Longxi." Yuan forgot his fear and dismounted from his horse. Approaching the grassy area, he called out with a sense of nostalgia, "Why won't you come out of the grass?" Li Zheng replied, "I am not in human form at the moment. It would be shameful to show myself like this before my old friend. Besides, if you saw me, you would surely be afraid." But I'm truly happy to have met you like this. Please let me speak with you as the Li Zheng of old, even if only for a moment. Yuan heard Li Zheng's words from the grass and found them very strange. But at that moment, he felt little wonder, only sadness at having met his old friend. Yuan told his attendants to stop the group. He stood by the grassy area and talked with Li Zheng, who could only speak. They first talked about the capital and how their old friends were doing now. Yuan also told him about his current work, and Li Zheng praised him, saying, "You've become quite accomplished." Then Yuan finally asked, "Why did you become like this?" Li Zheng began speaking in a low voice. "It was about a year ago. While traveling, I woke up in the middle of the night and heard someone calling my name. Drawn by the voice, I went outside, and someone kept calling me. Before I knew it, I was running through the mountains, using my hands to push myself forward. I felt an incredible strength surging through my body, and I was leaping over rocks. After a while, I noticed that hair was growing on my hands and elbows. When the night began to grow lighter, I saw my reflection in the river and was terrified. I was no longer human, I had become a tiger. At first, I thought it was a dream. But when I realized it wasn't a dream, I couldn't think of anything else but fear. I didn't know why this had happened. There was no reason for it. I thought about dying. But then, a rabbit ran past me. The next moment, I chased after the rabbit and, before I knew it, I was eating it with a mouth covered in blood. That was my first act as a tiger. Since then, every day, there is a brief moment when my human mind returns. During that time, I can speak and think just as I did when I was human. But gradually, that time is growing shorter. In the past, I used to wonder, why did I become a tiger? But the other day, I suddenly thought, why was I human in the first place? This is very terrifying. If this continues, the human heart within me will disappear. And I will become a true tiger, unable to recognize you, and end up eating you." Li Zheng continued his story. "But I think that by then, my heart will be gone, so that will probably be the easiest way. But right now, there's still a little bit of human heart left, and that's what scares me the most. The thought of forgetting what it was like to be human is so sad I can't stand it. I think only someone who's experienced the same thing could understand this feeling." Li Zheng paused for a moment before speaking again. "So I have a request. I always wanted to be a poet. But that dream never came true, and now I'm in this form. I wrote many poems before, but I don't know where they are anymore. But I still remember dozens of them. I want you to write them down and keep them for me. I want to leave behind some proof that I live. That's the only thing I can't let go of." Yuan took Li Zheng's feelings to heart. He ordered his servant to write down each poem Li Zheng recited in the grass. Li Zheng read the poems aloud in a loud voice. He recited about 30 poems, some short and some long. Each one was splendid, clearly the work of a master. But Yuan thought to himself, these are indeed wonderful poems. But there is something just a little off about them. When Li Zheng finished reciting his poems, he suddenly began speaking in a voice that seemed to mock himself. "It's embarrassing, but I still sometimes have a dream. I dream that my poetry collection is placed on the desks of distinguished people in the capital. I see it while lying in a hole. Even as a tiger, I still think about such things. How pathetic, don't you think?" Yuan-san recalled the days when the old Li Zheng used to tease him, and he felt very sad. Li Zheng continued his story. "Then, as a final act, I'll express my current feelings in a poem. I want you to hear this and know that my heart is still human." Yuan told his servant to write it down again. Li Zheng paused for a moment before beginning to recite the poem in a low voice. Without any warning, a calamity came upon me, turning me into a beast. Now that I cannot escape, sharp fangs and claws have grown, and no one can defeat me. But when I was human, many people praised me. Now I am hiding in the grass, while you have risen to prominence. Tonight, instead of singing a poem to the mountains and the moon, I can only howl." When Li Zheng finished reciting the poem, his voice fell silent for a moment. At that moment, the sky began to grow gradually brighter, and a cold wind blew through the trees. It was clear that night was nearing its end. Yuan and the others stood there in silence, their hearts heavy. Li Zheng's voice sounded again, softly. "Earlier, I said I didn't know why I had become this way, but upon reflection, I can think of a reason. When I was human, I avoided interacting with others. People around me called me arrogant or unapproachable. But in truth, I was ashamed of myself. I was constantly anxious about whether I truly had any talent. So I refused to study or help others. Yet I couldn't find satisfaction in an ordinary life either." Li Zheng continued, "Deep down, I was always terrified of the thought, what if I have no talent? So I couldn't bring myself to study hard for the rest of my life. But half of me believed that I did have talent, so I couldn't live an ordinary life like everyone else either. As a result, I gradually stopped interacting with people, and every day I was filled with anxiety and shame. Because of that, the arrogant feelings inside me grew stronger and stronger. I remember something someone said long ago. Everyone has a wild beast inside them. That beast is their personality. In my case, this arrogant but actually cowardly heart was my wild beast. That beast ruined me. It made my family suffer and hurt my friends. Eventually, not just my heart but my body too became a real beast." Li Zheng remained silent for a moment, then spoke again. "Looking back now, I wasted all my talent. I used to say, life is too long to do nothing, but too short to do something, but I never took action. The fear of failure and the laziness destroyed me. Even with little talent, someone who had polished it diligently could have become a great poet. Now, as a tiger, I've finally realized that." Li Zheng took a deep breath. "I can't go back to being human. Even if I come up with a wonderful poem, I can't share it with anyone. Worse yet, my heart is slowly turning into that of a tiger." Li Zheng spoke with a trembling voice. "What should I do? What about the past I wasted? This feeling is unbearable. That's why I run up the mountain and howl at the moon. I want someone to understand. But the beasts only cower in fear, and the mountains, trees, and moon probably think I'm just angry. But I'm so sad, I can't stand it. My fur is wet from the night dew, but that's not all. I'm crying." The sky gradually grew brighter. The mournful sound of a horn announcing dawn echoed from somewhere in the distance. Li Zheng said finally, "We must part now. I will soon return to the heart of a tiger. But I have one request. Please tell my wife and children that I have died. Please do not speak of today's events. And if you could help those people so they do not suffer on the road in the future, I would be grateful." Li Zheng's voice trembled with tears. Actually, this was the request I should have made first. If I were still human, but I was only thinking about myself. I was consumed by the thought of whether my poems would survive. That's why I've become this beast." Li Zheng's voice had a bitter tone, as if mocking himself. "There's one more request. When you finish your journey and return, please do not pass this way again. By then, I will have lost my human heart and will not recognize you as a friend. I might end up hurting you." Li Zheng continued, "And one more thing, just 100 steps away from this path, there's a small hill. When you get there, please look back at me one more time. I'll show you my current form. It's not because I want to show you my strength. I want you to see this ugly form and not think, I want to see him again. Yuan's heart was filled with emotion. He quietly mounted his horse and said to the grassy field, I understand. I will do everything as you say. I will make sure to tell your wife and children. From within the grass, Li Zheng's sobbing could be heard. Thank you. Yuan's eyes were also filled with tears. He could not bring himself to speak. Yuan turned back toward the grass multiple times before slowly beginning to walk away. Yuan and the others parted ways with Li Zheng and began walking. After walking for a while, they reached the top of the hill. Yuan stopped the horse as instructed and turned around. He stared intently at the grassy area where Li Zheng had been. Then, a large shadow emerged from between the grass. It was a tiger. It must have been Li Zheng. The tiger slowly stepped onto the path and looked up at the pale morning moon. Gao! It roared twice in a loud voice. The sound was filled with sorrow and pain. Then the tiger spun around and leaped back into the grassy area. It never showed itself again. Yuan remained on the hilltop for a while, his chest tightening with sorrow. Tears trickled down his cheeks. Li Zheng, you were truly a sad man, he murmured, then gently urged his horse forward, slowly making his way along the path as the eastern sky began to brighten.